Hi and welcome to My CTO Friend, the place where non-technical founders build successful startups by improving their tech management skills. I'm Amaury and today I'm going to answer a question from Moctar, a startup founder who has already developed a first version of his payment solution. His question is, we need to switch from one technical team to another. Where should we start? Before answering this question, let's add a bit of context. The freelancer Moctar hired to develop the first version is not available anymore. So, Moctar needs to switch to another freelancer and build his own team. Unfortunately, this situation is quite common. So every startup founder should be prepared to overcome it. And the best way to do so is to gather all the technical information so that we can define which type of profile we need and we can switch to someone new. Having this technical information will also be very useful for the future developer since he will understand quickly how the application works on a technical level. So to answer Moctar's question, I've created a list of things you should ask a living developer. The first thing to do is to ask for the source code. That sounds obvious, but if you have the source code, you can move on. With the development of your application. If you don't, you are stuck. And unfortunately, I often see developers or agencies keeping control of the source code on purpose, especially when there is a conflict. So, the source code needs to belong to the startup, not the provider, not the founder. The company should ask for access to the source code from the day one. And the second thing to do is to ask for the database backup. And the database can be provided under two formats. Either just the structure, usually required for any developer to move forward, or filled with data. On that note, in theory, developers should only have access to the test database, not your entire production database, that is the one that has your users' information. But all of that depends on your stage. If you only have one technical profile, this person is often in charge of development as well as managing production. After getting the source code and your database, the next things to ask your living developers is for access to production and all environments, like test or development environment. When we manage a SaaS services or any application with customers' data in it, we need a hosting provider to store the centralized information. Having access to these servers or services is a requirement when it comes to managing a tech startup. We often talk about server access, but these days, having a server is not always a requirement. We also rely on cloud services that run our application in the cloud instead of a single server. And the other access that is related to the hosting management is the DNS access, the domain name service management. If you ask your previous team to handle this part for you, you might have to ask the login and password for it. If you bought the domain name by yourself, you probably already have it. Okay, so far we covered the essentials, the bare minimum for a good tech profile to inquire, analyze, and retro-engineer things. But it's going to take time for a technical profile to go through the source code, the database structure, and to figure out how it was built. So to speed up the process, here are some complementary technical topics to inquire about. That will make your new developer's life, and therefore yours, a lot easier. Let's ask your developer which language and framework has the application been built on. You will need this information to find the right replacement person. And the next point is regarding any third-party components. It's often faster to reuse existing components or services to build a solution, especially compared to developing everything from scratch. So ask your developer what API services you use, like for example, social media authentication, but it can also be something more specific like API management, image manipulation, or any type of conversion. And next, every software has its own installation procedure. It might sound obvious when we talk about software when we would install it on a personal computer. But it's not always as straightforward for a software we install on a server. The developers often forget to write down an installation procedure or even just a screencast of this procedure. Ask for it. This is usually something that should be in the README file of your source code. Make sure you have it. And finally, I'm going to conclude with what should be the first things a new developer will look at: the architecture diagram. Unfortunately, this one rarely exists in early stage startup. And switching from one team to another might be the best opportunity to create one. That's actually something I do on a regular basis when I help startups grow. So to conclude, let's review the checklist of what you need to ask a leaving developer or a tech profile. Ask for the source code, then the database backup, the production and the test environment access, the domain name access, the language and the framework used to develop your application, external services and access to them, the installation procedure, and the architecture diagram. These will be the best help for you if you have to move on with someone new. And if, like Moctar, you have a specific question for your project, just go ahead and ask on myctofriend.co/ask. I will do my best to answer your question by videos or to redirect you to an existing content that will answer it. And also be sure to go through our next courses at MyCTO Friends to learn more from real startup growth experience. Waiting for your question, I look forward to seeing you in other videos. Cheers!